So, good afternoon. Welcome to Company Roots. Today we're interviewing Bradford Manning, a philanthropist and one of the co-founders of Two Blind Brothers, a clothing company that has the sole purpose of raising funds for blindness research.
Two Blind Brothers has also been featured on the New York Post, Forbes, NBC, and ABC, and your organization has also received funding from The Ellen Show, Ashton Kutcher, and Richard Branson. It is a privilege and we're truly honored to interview you today. My name is Raul Kavoru. I'm a rising junior at St. Paul School, New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots.
My name is Mark Wallier. I'm a rising freshman at Seton Hall University, and I'm an interviewer for Company Roots.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm really excited and very, very, very honored to be included in your guys' show. And happy to jump into it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. So the first question we always like to start is with what are your roots and how did they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a special question for me because our story, especially as it relates to Two Blind Brothers, really started when I was 5 years old and failed the kindergarten eye chart, which started this 2-year hunt to figure out what had happened to my eyesight. And after a lot of doctors and a lot of wrong conclusions, we finally figured out that it's because I have Stargardt's disease, which is a juvenile form of macular degeneration. And that's an eye condition that affects your center vision. It causes you to go legally blind. And that really started this kind of journey for me, which was, learning how to face a unique challenge. And that process really informed a lot of my life. And through great parents that gave us great self-esteem, great confidence, learning how to be assertive, resourceful, creative, through the process of being visually impaired. We were very fortunate, my brother and I, to come out the other end. And to now be able to be in a position to run this project and give back to a community that we're very close to. And that's kind of where we started.
Right. And I'm sure you must have learned a lot of lessons along the way, especially by where you are now and with Two Blind Brothers. So for viewers who might not know too much about your work, can you briefly explain what you do and also a little bit about your organization?
Absolutely. And I'm going to let the viewers know up front, I'm in a car here, so I apologize if there's any like GPS directions or like people honking at us as we weave in and out of traffic. So Two Blind Brothers is a charitable clothing brand with two simple missions. One, to make the softest shirts that we possibly can, and two, to help cure blindness by giving 100% of our profits back to researchers through the foundation fighting blindness. And it started because my brother and I got lost in a clothing store. We ended up walking out with the exact same shirt. We realized that was because of how soft it was. And this vigilance to touch has always been a part of our experience, whether it was learning Braille as kids, whether it was paying attention to softness over the prices, the labels, the sizes when we were shopping for clothes. And so we decided to start this brand about 4 years ago with no fashion background, no marketing background, no e-commerce background, just the desire to have some fun, do something good for the visually impaired community. We ended up getting very, very, very lucky with our story. There was some folks in the community and some media outlets that latched onto our story. And before we knew it, we were doing some local news. And then we got some big publicity from the Ellen DeGeneres Show and NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. And that really changed the whole trajectory of what we were doing. Very quickly, we learned that as much and as important as this was for the research that we were trying to fund, it really became about the community and trying to empower this this group of people that we were getting connected to, that shared a very similar experience to us of facing a challenge or being visually impaired, but didn't necessarily have the same perspective because they haven't gone through the journey that we went through, and had the same perspective to overcome that challenge or to fight through those difficult situations that we had the benefit of going through and coming out strong on the other side.
Right.
And yeah, so you were mentioning earlier on about that story that really sparked you into getting interested in clothing because of how soft it was to the touch. So once you first started to realize that that was something that you wanted to pursue, what was the process like in first developing your clothing line and partnering with clinical study organizations such as the Foundation for Fighting Blindness?
And sorry, what was the very first part of that question?
Just the process in when you were first developing your organization. What was it like, some of the challenges you might have went through?
Yeah, so we're kind of an interesting example of a business because we had no intention of growing this into a scalable business. This had two purposes. One, we were going to have fun and we were going to help the Foundation Fighting Blindness by making some shirts for their our community through FFB. What we've learned retrospectively is if you actually love something so much that you're going to work on it regardless of the business prospects, that gives you a huge advantage because you're going to bring all of your creativity and all of your effort to bear to that project. But then secondly, we live in a very interesting time right now where a small or nuanced or niche project actually can scale very, very efficiently. We do a lot of advertising through paid social and digital channels. And if you think about it, there really aren't that many people who are speaking as relevantly to our small but growing and now actually emerging clothing brand audience. So if you care about vision impairment, or you're one of the 1 in 30 people in the country that knows somebody, or 1 in 10 people in the country that knows somebody with a retinal eye disease, our brand all of a sudden feels very familiar to you. It feels like we're speaking to a value that you may not be hearing from another brand. So that's how we ended up starting, is very small, only serving a very small community. And then the authenticity of our story got picked up by national media. And then we started to realize sort of the power of actually being a nuanced, more niche project, because we were able to grab those customers that weren't being talked to by other brands in the same way. And some of the challenges that we faced were a huge learning curve. We struggled a lot with production early on, with learning how to, create an e-commerce engine that worked for us. The best piece of advice the best thing that we learned was actually talking to people who have just passed the milestone that you're trying to hit. That was we would kind of bang our heads against the wall trying to figure out how to solve a particular problem for months. Then we would talk to somebody who had gone through it, and they would say, oh, use this developer or use this production facility. And for example, shout out to Andy, who runs an online retailer called Huckberry for outdoor wear. And he solved a lot of our problems. We also talked with Dave from Bombas Socks. They gave us our email marketing team. And so even if you're coming out of college and you're looking to take that next step, whether it's in a career or an entrepreneurial activity, talking to somebody who has just gone through it all is an extremely valuable valuable process. And then on the research side, that was easier because we had a very long relationship with Foundation Fighting Blindness. We had always been funding them from a charitable perspective, from a personal perspective. And, some of the exciting stuff there is just if you kind of are watching what's happening in medicine, we're living through a medical revolution. And some of these gene therapies that are now curing different types of rare blindness. I mean, for us, because we're funding such early clinical projects, these are projects that'll hopefully 10 years from now be new treatments. But while we're waiting for that, there's work that was done 10 years prior that's already coming into therapies for patients. For example, Luxturna is the name of a gene therapy that treats a condition called LCA, which reverses blindness in children for about 1,000 children in the U.S. through a company called Spark Therapeutics.
Yeah. And I always grew up hearing the advice that the greatest entrepreneurs are the ones that are willing to learn along the way and are not really afraid. So kind of taking a step back, you graduated from the University of Virginia with a degree in finance. So how were you able to leverage this education in your philanthropic and business role at Two Blind Brothers?
It's interesting because I worked in at a couple different banks and investment firms in New York prior to Two Blind Brothers, and I think one I don't know. I'm like 15 years out of school now, so things may have changed. But when I was graduating in my business school, undergrad business school program, everyone wanted to be an investment banker or a consultant. Those were sort of the two main tracks. And what's kind of funny is the people who ended up deviating from that and doing something else, actually, I think saw more acceleration in their careers because they were taking their extremely, their intelligence, their ambition, and their passion and deploying it into, frankly, a less competitive area. So as soon as Brian and I moved from our other careers over to Two Blind Brothers, I guess you could say there was more low-hanging fruit. This wasn't, whether we were negotiating with production facilities, whether we were hiring folks to work with us, we were kind of opened up to this. We were so myopic in our perspective on work because we were working in New York City in very narrow careers. And the ability to actually step into a place that doesn't get that same level of attention from sort of ambitious business folks, I feel like actually was an advantage in some ways. And that's all just to say that, I really encourage people to pursue those careers that aren't necessarily on trend if they feel like they have some passion for it, because you'll actually be more of a standout than running the same kind of rat race that everybody else is trying to run.
Right.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense just because, nowadays I plan on going to school for a finance degree, but engineering has really become a blossoming field. And they say that, you can never have enough engineers. And my brother was actually an engineering major. He's been out of school for a few years, and he ended up, all over the place in a bunch of different fields, just trying to find where he could accelerate best because, there might be a lot of engineering majors. There's not that many engineering jobs out there and careers to follow. So, it's something really interesting how you were able to use that background you had to really accelerate in a different field. But earlier you mentioned how, you're funding a lot of clinical research projects that hopefully in 10 years could have a really big impact on finding treatments and cures for these types of diseases. And I was just wondering, where do you see your organization to be in 10 years? Is there any other projects you might plan to take on or ways that you plan to evolve your company?
I'll tell you, so very different from how I think about most startups or most new businesses. We didn't have to take on outside capital. We never set this out as a business plan to, be the next Tom Shoes. And in some ways, that's been an advantage because I don't need to sit here and tell you that we're going to be, a $1 billion company in 10 years in order to keep our employees or investors and everyone excited and motivated. What we're focused on is reaching what we think is the critical scale for our business and slowly and exploring avenues of growth. But what we view as the metric of success is, one, profitability, being able to donate funds back to the Foundation Fighting Blindness and that charitable aspect of the brand. The more money we make, the more we can donate. Mm-hmm. The other side of it is, can we serve as an example for other projects like ours? One of the kind of cool things about Two Blind Brothers clothing brand is we're fairly, we're not extremely unique in the fact that we make soft clothing. I think it's the best clothing you could possibly wear, but I'm biased. But the truth of the matter is, our brand succeeded based on, a lot of pieces, but very importantly, our personal story. And I really think there's a fantastic opportunity for other folks out there, whether you have a personal challenge or personal story or a novel solution to a problem that you're passionate about. If Two Blind Brothers can get scale as a clothing brand with a nuanced charitable message, then that really means that there's a lot of open road for people who have entrepreneurial tendencies, who want to create their version of whatever we're doing. So one of the things that gets us really excited is exactly what we're doing today, which is sharing our perspective and our story so that the next person who hears it or is thinking about it might get some advice. Brian and I have had one of the greatest adventures of our lives building this project. I mean, you have to appreciate that, 5 or 6 years ago, where you're sleeping under your desk at a small private equity firm, getting, just trying to keep up with the work versus going on the Ellen DeGeneres show and being told that you're a hero. One feels a lot better than the other. And when we get to hear from folks that are affected with these conditions, or we get to talk to a mother or father, or we get to go speak at a national sales conference for one of these big biotech companies, it's been a really fulfilling experience. And that's one of the things that gets us really motivated, is actually trying to use our project as an example for that next project or company.
Right. And I was able to watch that YouTube video where you guys appeared on the Ellen show and where your organization received $30,000 in funding, which is incredible. So can you describe that experience and some of your takeaways?
Okay, so it was like the most nerve-wracking experience of my entire life for like a variety of reasons. We were invited to be on that show 6 months after launching our project. We had hardly sold anything. And we were so nervous from the first call. There's probably 4 or 5 calls before they kind of green-lighted us to be on the show. I was so afraid of saying something stupid that they were gonna say, no thanks, we're not ready to have you on. So because it's just such a huge platform, and Ellen is kind of like a celebrity's celebrity. I mean, she's got one of the biggest audiences in the world. People want to promote the things that she's promoting. And so we somehow, through just a lot of sheer luck and my brother's wit and charm, we somehow convinced them to be on the show. You're kind of you're sitting there in the green room and you're actually watching the show being filmed, and they film it, and then the next day is when they air it. So we're watching and Jamie Foxx is on, and we're like getting more and more nervous. And, they remind us that there's 5 million people that are going to be watching this. And, there was one little advantage that I think helped us in the interview process to get on the show and being on the show, which was that, we decided very early on with the brand that if we were trying to brand this project as anything except ourselves, we weren't really going to enjoy it. So if we were going to try to pitch Two Blind Brothers as a luxury brand or have some sort of polished facade that required us to memorize certain talking points or brand values that weren't so innate to us, then it was going to make this a much more anxious moment. And one thing that we realized now with running sort of a brand is being relatable and being authentic and being transparent actually is a way for drawing people into what you're doing. So we did have that advantage going on the show, that we knew that we were always just transformational for us, because it just brought us so much attention. It gave us a lot of credibility, and we still had our other jobs when we went on that show. And so at that point, with her endorsement and the endorsements that followed that, we were able to kind of then hire a bunch of people, upgrade our infrastructure, and really work on this full time.
Yeah, so, during that point in your company, you just mentioned, that was a really big stepping stone for you guys to be able to, possibly move from your old job and really go all in on this project. But, right now it's definitely been a tough time for organizations just having to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I was wondering how, you guys have evolved your production and specifically, how you deliver your product and advertise to your consumers, because everyone's having troubles and, everyone has their own unique way of, overcoming them.
Yeah, so it's in a weird way, certain businesses have been helped by the COVID pandemic. E-commerce is one of those places. So when everybody was kind of forced to shelter in place and spend more time on social media, it actually helped e-commerce because those same discretionary dollars weren't spent at restaurants or retail stores as much. So luckily, God bless, we've been fortunate to be insulated from a lot of those issues. We had plenty of inventory coming out of the end of holiday. So some of these production facilities have been shut down because of social distancing rules. Our fulfillment center in Kentucky, fortunately, was deemed an essential business. They were shipping out certain medical products. So our fulfillment center was able to fulfill orders. So we are just fortunate, we count our blessings that we've been somewhat protected from that, and it's been challenging with certain aspects, some delays on fulfillment and things like that. But we are the last to complain about it, because we've seen what's happened to friends of ours, to small businesses that we're close to, and it's been a devastating process for some of them. And luckily we've been protected from some of that.
Yeah, definitely. And also more like the philanthropic role. I noticed you are also a director on the board, or a board member of the Foundation Fighting Blindness organization. So what specific work are you involved within that position?
So the Foundation Fighting Blindness, it's kind of like the big, gigantic, 501c3 that has been funding preclinical research for retinal eye disease for the past 40 or 50 years. So they've given, close to $1 billion to retinal researchers. They're responsible for a lot of the successful treatments that are coming down the pipeline now that are curing diseases. And to be able to be invited to be on their board, I think I've been on for a couple of years now. Basically what we do as a board is we're really responsible for overseeing the organization, helping set some of the strategic plans, and also fundraising, where we can. The board takes a big responsibility for helping to fundraise. And so I've taken a new role on within the board right now. We're forming this new committee on social media and marketing and communication. So we're going to try to mimic some of the success we've had with Two Blind Brothers for the Foundation Fighting Blindness to kind of help try to get some of that grassroots attention. But what's cool about that position is that the impact is large. And so, Two Blind Brothers has been great from an awareness perspective, and it's given us a lot of gifts in terms of the adventure of running it, building it, and very fulfilling from a business perspective. But Foundation Fighting Blindness has the dollars, has the network, has the history to literally bring about the next cure for blindness. So being able to be a part of that, both listening in on the science conversations, the fundraising conversations, the corporate partnerships with the biotech partners that they work with, that's been very educational and big from an impact standpoint.
Yeah, that seems like your relationship with FFB is also important for Two Blind Brothers and vice versa. So back to Two Blind Brothers, behind every great company mission, there's a great team. So we're just wondering, what qualities do you specifically look for in hiring people, and what atmosphere do you try to create in the office?
Yeah, so it's interesting. A lot of what we do is not rocket science. It does require a lot of creativity. I mean, one kind of funny thing about a clothing brand is clothing is actually quite difficult to differentiate in. It's not like a gene therapy where you have the only product. It doesn't matter what your marketing is. If you have that disease and this therapy can cure it, they're going to go get it. Clothing is different. There are tens of thousands of brands for people to shop. So the way that clothing differentiates itself is actually with its story and with its marketing. So so creativity is critical because your messaging, your story needs to rise above the noise of the other 10,000 messages that you're getting that day. So creativity is very important. Good execution of, just project management, deciding what we need to do, making a list of the steps to do it, and then just executing on it. It's worth a lot. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to do 100% of our business. And so in terms of the team, Brian and I are very lucky because my brother and I, we share a lot of the same values. We think very similarly, but we do bring some slightly different skill sets. We very flat, like a very flat organization where, because the priorities of the business change very frequently, we might hit an issue where we need to find a new fulfillment center, or we might come up with a new campaign that takes all of our attention, or the person who's handling our, watching our inventory management and our logistics might have to go in and change something on the website. So just good all around team players, extremely responsive, professional communicators, people that can, speak their mind and listen well and take feedback and have good emotional discipline. Those are things that are very important on our team.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. And also, I was able to watch your TED Talk titled "Is My Brother's Greatest Weakness a Secret Weapon?" So how have you been able to use how have you been able to utilize your condition and turn it into a very big asset and your greatest strength?
I'll tell you what, this is like, I almost get goosebumps talking about this because it was it wasn't really a huge revelation until starting this project. But, if you think back on the hardest things that you've had to deal with, could be a physical challenge, could be a family issue, it could be a friend issue, it could be a relationship issue, it could just be a sport or a class you took. The funny thing is that one of the greatest skills that you can learn in life is how to embrace a challenge. And what happens when you are put under the stress of a challenge is you grow. When you can't change your situation, you change yourself. And so under that pressure is when you learn how to be resourceful. You learn how to be assertive. You learn that creativity. And, an example is like when I was really young at school and I couldn't see something on the chalkboard, I would get up out of my seat and actually walk like a foot from the board to see it. And there's a lot of social pressure in that. Some kid in the class is going to tease you for that. So everyone's going to look at you doing it, and what happens is the first time you do something like that, it's awkward and you dread doing it, or you say, how can I avoid this, whatever. But the 1000th time, it's second nature. You've figured out how to navigate all the pressure around that. And so that is a small example. You take, if vision impairment was a challenge that ended up exposing all these other skill sets. My brother always talks about how we can't recognize faces well. So when you meet somebody that you don't know, and you kind of don't know what the context for that person is yet, you can't see, you'll take a lot of responsibility for the conversation. I might, if I were to run into you a week from now, I wouldn't recognize your face. You might say, oh, hey, how's it going? And I would say, oh, hey, man, how's it been? What have you been up to? Like, oh, man, the weather's crazy. COVID's nuts, and that skill that my brother, talks about a lot and that I've experienced of like, it's just, you learn under pressure, under challenge is where all of your internal potential is revealed. And that's not just because of vision impairment, but and maybe we would have learned those things without the vision impairment, but maybe not. So that's why we say that at some level it was a great gift.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I bet you've heard this a million times, but, that's just really inspiring, especially as a 17-year-old, to go through something like that and come out on the other end even stronger is just really, really inspiring. So,
it's not obvious in the moment when you're facing that problem, or you're doing that last set at the gym, or you're going up to that person that you were nervous to talk to. It's not obvious in the moment what the benefit of that is, but you project out a few years and you have cultivated in yourself a spirit of kind of just doing your best in those situations. You'll look back and realize that created a skill that is incredibly valuable in life. And I've had some good mentors in that space. I remember in my early career, I wanted to get advice from some people on what career I should go into. And there's one guy I didn't want to go talk to because he was like the CEO of a commercial real estate company. And I just thought he was too far outside of what I needed to know, and I didn't want to bother him. And, the person who was setting up the meeting for me said, he is actually the most important person for you to talk to, not because of the advice he's going to give you, but because he makes you the most uncomfortable. And it's just a really great principle.
Yeah. So we always end the interview off on the same question. What advice would you give the next generation of high school students like our age that would like to start the process to make a positive impact on society? And how would you recommend they start this process?
So, you know, you it's like in the airplane where they tell you to like put your mask on first before you help others. My advice to people who are in high school is, you know, you have a skill set to develop. You are there with great teachers, great mentors around you. People want to help young people. Colleges that you guys are the college programs everyone's looking at and working hard to study and learn from. Dive into that. Like your finance major looking into engineering, looking into engineering, that multidisciplinary skill sets. Dive into all that. Learn as much as you can, because it's not as easy to acquire those new skills later in life. There's, one of the things that surprised me after college is, there's a lot of partying that you can do for your entire life, but there aren't that many opportunities to be surrounded in an academic setting where you can learn to actually absorb those skills, to find good mentors, to make sure that you're developing your skills so that when you want to turn on that, to make that impact, the advice or the contacts or the experience that you're bringing to that person or that cause or that organization is going to be much, much more valuable. There are certain people that feel that calling from day one, where they say, look, I know I'm going to be happiest going right into this organization and this charity, this cause, and doing what I can today. And if you already have that energy to do that, then you should do that 100%. For everybody else who's like trying to figure out what they want to do, the best thing that you can do is just to build up yourself, because once you build up yourself, then it's easier to help others.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for letting us interview today. It was an honor and a privilege.